He was the man who made an entire generation fall in love with cars. He was the man who could tell you the torque figures of a 1994 Toyota Supra from memory, faster than most people can name their own phone number. But behind the movies, behind the fame, behind that unforgettable smile, Paul Walker was quietly building one of the most extraordinary private car collections the world had ever seen. And today, we are going to take you inside every single corner of it. The man behind the wheel. Before we dive into the garage, let's get one thing absolutely straight. Paul Walker was not just an actor who pretended to love cars for the cameras. This was not a Hollywood performance. The man genuinely, deeply, almost obsessively loved automobiles in a way that very few celebrities ever have or ever will. While most of his co-stars were busy spending their fast and furious paychecks on mansions in Beverly Hills and tables at exclusive nightclubs, Paul Walker was spending his on cars, rare cars, Japanese imports, track-ready machines, vehicles that most people had never even heard of, let alone seen in person. He grew up in Glendale, California, and from an early age, cars were not just transportation to him. They were a language, a passion, a way of understanding the world. Long before the first Fast and Furious film ever rolled cameras in 2001, Paul Walker was already the kind of guy who spent his weekends at car shows, flipping through automotive magazines, and crawling under chassis just to understand how things worked. He was so serious about his automotive knowledge that he co-founded a company called Always Evolving, a performance shop based in Valencia, California, that specialized in building and tuning high-performance vehicles. This was not a vanity project slapped together by a celebrity with too much money and too little sense. This was a fully operational, deeply respected performance shop that produced some genuinely serious race cars. The total estimated value of Paul Walker's car collection sits somewhere in the region of $50 million. Some sources place it higher. When you see what was sitting inside that garage, you will understand why. And when we get to the final car on this list, I promise you, your jaw is going to hit the floor. Toyota Supra MK04. And in Paul Walker's world, the very beginning means one car and one car only, the Toyota Supra MK04. Now, if you grew up in the early 2000s, you already know exactly what we are talking about. That orange Supra, the one Brian O'Connor drove through the streets of Los Angeles in the original Fast and Furious film. The one with the enormous rear wing, the twin-turbo straight-six engine, and enough screen presence to launch a franchise that is now worth billions of dollars. That car did not just make Paul Walker famous. That car changed the entire automotive culture of a generation. But here's the thing that most people do not know. The Supra in the film was not just a prop. Paul Walker actually cared deeply about that car. He understood what it represented. The MK4 Supra, produced between 1993 and 2002, was powered by the legendary 2JZ GTE engine, a 3-liter twin turbocharged inline-six that in stock form produced around 320 horsepower. However, and this is where it gets interesting, with modifications, that same engine could be pushed to 600, 700, even over 1,000 horsepower. It was essentially a blank canvas for anyone who knew what they were doing with a wrench. And Paul Walker absolutely knew what he was doing with a wrench. The real-world value of a clean, well-maintained MK4 Supra has absolutely exploded in recent years. We are talking about examples selling at auction for over $200,000. Some highly modified or low-mileage examples have gone even higher. A car that you could have picked up for $15,000 in 2010 is now a genuine collector's piece, and Paul Walker's connection to it is a huge part of why. He did not just drive this car in a movie, he made it iconic. And that, my friends, is a very special kind of automotive legacy. Nissan Skyline GT-R R34. Alright, now we are getting into seriously rare territory, because the next car in Paul Walker's collection is one that most American car enthusiasts spent the better part of a decade dreaming about from behind a computer screen, staring at import forums and wondering if they would ever get their hands on one. The Nissan Skyline GT-R R34. For those who need a quick history lesson, and no judgment if you do, the R34 Skyline GT-R was produced by Nissan from 1999 to 2002. It was powered by the RB26 ETT engine, a 2.6-liter twin turbocharged inline-six that Nissan officially rated at 276 horsepower. Now, that official figure was what we in the automotive world politely call a complete work of fiction. The actual output was significantly higher, and with modifications, these engines became absolute monsters. Here is the problem for American fans. Due to United States federal import regulations, specifically the 25-year import rule, the R34 was completely illegal to own and drive on American roads for years. You could not buy one. You could not import one. You could not register one. It was the forbidden fruit of the Japanese performance car world, and that made everyone wanted even more. Paul Walker, being Paul Walker, found a way. He acquired an R34 Skyline GTR through legal import channels, and it became one of the crown jewels of his always evolving collection. His example was finished in Bayside Blue, which, if you know anything about R34s, you already know is the most desirable color these cars ever came in. It is practically the automotive equivalent of finding a first edition signed copy of your favorite book. Today, clean R34 GTRs are selling for anywhere between $150,000 and $500,000, depending on specification and condition. Paul Walker owned one at a time when almost no one else in America legally could. That tells you everything you need to know about how serious this man was. BMW M3 GTR. Here is one for the video game fans in the audience, because the next car on our list is the one that made every single person who ever played Need for Speed. Most Wanted in 2005 absolutely lose their mind when it appeared in Fast 2, Furious back in 2003. The BMW M3 GTR. Now, let's be very clear about something. The real-world BMW M3 GTR is not just a fast car with a sporty badge slapped on the back. This is a genuine homologation special, meaning BMW built a road-going version purely so they could race a version of it in the American Le Mans series. That is a very different animal from your average performance saloon. The road-going version, and I use that term extremely loosely, was powered by a 4-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine, producing around 444 horsepower. A proper screaming high-revving V8 in an M3. Extraordinary. And here is the number that will make your eyes water. BMW built fewer than 10 road-legal examples of this car. Not fewer than 100, fewer than 10. You could fit the entire global supply of road-legal M3 GTRs into a single modest-sized car park and still have spaces left over. The car that appeared in the film was modified for Hollywood, naturally, but the association between Paul Walker and that iconic white and blue M3 GTR burned itself into the memory of an entire generation so completely that the car has since earned its place among the most recognizable vehicles in cinema history. We are talking Aston Martin DB5 territory, DeLorean levels of cultural recognition. And honestly, given how jaw-dropping it looked on screen, it absolutely deserves that company. What is particularly interesting is that Walker's connection to this car was not purely cinematic. His appreciation for German engineering was genuine and well documented, making the M3 GTR a completely natural fit for a man who approached every car with real knowledge and real passion, rather than just a large checkbook. On the extremely rare occasions a road-going M3 GTR surfaces at auction, and we are talking once in a blue moon rare, prices comfortably exceed $500,000. Some estimates place particularly clean or well-documented examples even higher than that. Paul Walker drove one of the most exclusive BMWs ever built across cinema screens worldwide and made it look completely effortless. The man had taste. Exceptional, almost unreasonably expensive taste. And not a single person on the planet is going to argue with that. Ford GT. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Paul Walker, a man famous for Japanese imports and European performance cars, owning an American supercar? Surely not. But, oh yes. Yes indeed. The Ford GT was a car that Walker reportedly could not resist. And honestly, who could blame him? The Ford GT, which went back into production in 2005 after a gap of nearly 4 decades, was Ford's statement to the entire automotive world that America could still build a proper supercar. And they absolutely delivered. Powered by a 5.4-liter supercharged V8 engine producing 550 horsepower, the Ford GT could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 3.3 seconds and hit a top speed of over 200 miles per hour. It was styled as a direct tribute to the legendary Ford GT40 race cars that conquered Le Mans in the 1960s, and it looked absolutely sensational doing it. Walker's Ford GT was finished in a classic color that suited the car perfectly, and it represented something slightly different from the rest of his collection. It showed that his passion for performance crossed all borders: Japanese, German, Italian, American. If it was fast, if it was special, if it had a story worth telling, Paul Walker wanted it in his garage. New Ford GTs sold for around $150,000 when they launched. Today, clean examples regularly fetch between $300,000 and $500,000 at auction. Some particularly low mileage or special specification cars have gone even higher. Not a bad investment for a man who bought it simply because he loved it. Nissan 350Z. Okay, so we have talked about forbidden Japanese legends, German racing homologation specials, and American supercars that would make a grown man weep with joy. The Nissan 350Z. Go ahead, take a moment, I will wait. I can already hear half of you saying, wait, the 350Z. Seriously? After the R34 Skyline, after the Carrera GT, after the Lamborghini Murcielago, we are stopping to talk about a Nissan 350Z. And look, I completely understand that reaction. I genuinely do. But hear me out, because this might actually be the single most important entry on this entire list, if you want to understand what kind of person Paul Walker really was. Because here is the truth. Anyone with enough money can walk into a dealership and write a check for a Lamborghini. Anyone with the right contacts and a large enough bank account can track down a Skyline GTR. Those purchases tell you that someone is wealthy. They tell you that someone has good connections. But they do not necessarily tell you that someone actually loves cars. The 350Z tells you that Paul Walker actually loved cars. The Nissan 350Z, produced from 2002 to 2009, was powered by a 3.5-liter V6 engine, producing 287 horsepower in standard form. It was never going to drag race a Murcielago and win. It was never going to turn more heads on Rodeo Drive than a Rolls-Royce. It was not the fastest car in Walker's collection, not the rarest, not the most valuable, and certainly not the one that photographers were camping outside his gate hoping to catch a glimpse of. But it was communicative, balanced, rewarding in the way that only a properly sorted rear-wheel drive sports car with a good chassis and honest steering can be rewarding. It was the kind of car that makes you a better driver simply by spending time in it. The kind of car that enthusiasts who have owned far more expensive machines will quietly tell you they miss more than almost anything else they have ever driven. And Walker used it. Actually used it. Not as a trailer queen trailered to shows and polished under spotlights. Not as a garage ornament sitting behind a velvet rope. He drove it regularly, the way a car is supposed to be driven, the way every car in a collection deserves to be driven by someone who genuinely understands what it was built for. That is the detail that separates a true car person from someone who simply collects expensive objects. Paul Walker drove his cars, all of them, including the humble, honest, completely wonderful 350Z that most people with his budget would never have bothered looking at twice. That is authenticity, real, unfiltered, completely unpretentious automotive authenticity. And no amount of money or Hollywood fame can manufacture something like that. You either have it or you do not. Paul Walker had it in abundance. Lamborghini Murcielago right. Time to talk about the Italian in the room. Because as much as Paul Walker's heart belonged to Japanese performance cars, his garage was not complete without at least one properly dramatic, properly outrageous, properly Italian supercar. Enter the Lamborghini Murcielago. The Murcielago, produced from 2001 to 2010, was Lamborghini's range-topping supercar for nearly a decade. It was named after a famous fighting bull from the 1800s, which survived a bullfight with such extraordinary bravery that the matador spared its life, which is a very dramatic origin story for a very dramatic car. Lamborghini, as we know, does not do anything quietly. The version in Walker's collection was powered by a 6.5-liter V12 engine producing 630 horsepower, capable of propelling the car from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 3.4 seconds and reaching a top speed of over 212 miles per hour. The iconic scissor doors, the wide, aggressive body, the theatrical exhaust note that sounds like the car is genuinely angry at you for existing. All of it combined to make the Murcielago one of the most visually and orally dramatic cars ever produced. Now, Walker was not exactly known for owning flashy cars just for the sake of showing off. But even he could not resist the Murcielago, and honestly, we respect that decision completely. Some cars exist on a level where resistance is simply not a realistic option. Clean Murcielago examples today sell for anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000. The LP674R versions, which are the most powerful and most desirable, regularly command even more. It was a worthy addition to a collection that was already operating at an extraordinarily high level. Porsche Carrera GT, and here we are. The car that we knew was coming, the car that has hung over this entire video like a shadow, the car that is impossible to discuss without feeling the weight of everything that happened on the 30th of November, 2013, in Valencia, California, the Porsche Carrera GT. Let us start with the car itself, because it deserves that respect before we talk about anything else. The Carrera GT was produced by Porsche between 2004 and 2006. Only 1,270 examples were built. It was powered by a naturally aspirated 5.7-liter V10 engine, derived from a Le Mans prototype racing program that was ultimately canceled. That engine produced 612 horsepower and delivered it to the rear wheels through a 6-speed manual gearbox with one of the shortest, most mechanical gear throws in automotive history. The Carrera GT had no electronic safety aids beyond ABS, no stability control, no traction control systems of any meaningful kind. It was a raw, unfiltered, extraordinarily demanding machine that required real skill and real respect to drive quickly. Professional drivers and automotive journalists who tested it regularly described it as one of the most challenging and rewarding cars they had ever sat in. It was not a car that forgave mistakes. It was not a car that looked after you when things went wrong. It was a car that demanded everything from the person behind the wheel and offered the most extraordinary experience in return. Paul Walker's Carrera GT was finished in silver and was part of the always evolving collection. On that Saturday afternoon in November 2013, Walker and his friend Roger Rodas, who was driving, took the Carrera GT out for a brief drive near the always evolving shop in Valencia. The car lost control at an estimated speed of between 80 and 93 miles per hour and struck a concrete lamppost and several trees. Both Paul Walker and Roger Rodas were killed instantly. The subsequent investigation raised questions about the tires fitted to the car, which were reportedly 9 years old at the time of the accident. The Carrera GT, with its demanding dynamics and its unforgiving nature at the limit, is a car that the world's best drivers have described as deeply challenging even under perfect conditions. Walker was 40 years old. The automotive world went quiet in a way it rarely does. Racing drivers, car designers, collectors, enthusiasts from every corner of the planet paid tribute to a man who had given millions of people not just entertainment, but a genuine love of cars. The Fast and Furious franchise, which at that point was one of the highest-grossing film series in history, was changed forever. The 7th film, released in 2015, ended with a tribute sequence that reduced cinemas full of grown adults to tears. The song, See You Again, performed by Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth, became one of the best-selling singles of all time. The Porsche Carrera GT, when it comes up for auction today, regularly sells for between $1 million and $1.5 million. A low-mileage, well-maintained example in desirable specification can exceed that significantly. It is one of the most collectible driver's cars ever produced, and its place in automotive history is secured by decades of spectacular driving dynamics and an achingly sad story that the world will never fully forget. For Paul Walker, the Carrera GT was simply another extraordinary machine in a collection full of extraordinary machines. A car he loved, a car he respected. The kind of car that a man who genuinely understood automobiles would inevitably be drawn to. We wish the story ended differently, We really do. The legacy Paul Walker's car collection was eventually handled through his estate following his passing. Many of the vehicles from the always evolving collection were sold, with proceeds going to support his family and charitable interests. Walker had established the Reach Out Worldwide Foundation, a disaster relief organization, and his legacy of giving continued long after his death. The cars he owned, the brands he championed, the culture he helped build around Japanese performance vehicles in particular, all of it left a permanent mark on the automotive world. Entire generations of enthusiasts trace their love of cars back to a specific moment, sitting in a cinema, watching an orange Toyota Supra launch off a screen, deciding, in that instant, that cars were the most exciting things in the world. Paul Walker did that. Not just the franchise, not just the scripts, not just the studio budgets. Paul Walker, the actual human being who genuinely loved automobiles with every part of his soul, did that. The total value of his collection, estimated at $50 million, reflects the extraordinary quality and rarity of the vehicles he chose to surround himself with. But the true value of what he built cannot be measured in dollars at auction or estimates from insurance companies. It is measured in the millions of people who walked out of cinemas and immediately started researching what a 2JZ engine actually was. It is measured in the surge in Japanese import values that followed his work. It is measured in every teenager who ever put a poster of an R34 Skyline on their bedroom wall. Paul Walker was not just a collector, he was an ambassador for cars, for culture, for the idea that passion and authenticity matter more than price tags and prestige. We will always miss him, and we will always remember the cars.